Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Be More podcast, where we inspire you to be a little bit more of every role within Salesforce, MuleSoft, Tableau, and Slack. For today's session, we are exploring the role of somebody that is investigating a lead scoring solution. And I'm joined again by Eric. So, Eric, are you able to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yeah. Thank you for having me back again. It's exciting to do another one of these. For those that hadn't gotten a chance to check out the first one, my name's Eric. I'm the Vice President of Revenue Operations and Digital Transformation over at Lens Financial, running for the longest job title someone could possibly have. Um, and my role basically involves transforming the organization and the customer experience over at Lens Financial. We are an organization that does um, mortgage loans. So anybody that's looking to buy a house, we are one of the mortgage lenders in the United States, and we are in a very specific niche. So which will come into play later in our conversation. My role is to be able to take all of these silos that we've built within different departments as companies that are growing and be able to unite them. And we're uniting them with Salesforce and a couple of other tools where there's now visibility and that full customer 360 picture that we are always talking about, being able to implement or get as close to that as we possibly can, all with customer experience in mind, making sure we can process loan applications as fast as we can with the highest degree of quality, as we like to say, to prove an undeniable experience to all of our brokers and borrowers alike. So that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. And I hope it's undeniably good, you know? Awesome. So now let's set the scene before we dive into the next batch of questions. Explain to me what you're doing around lead scoring and what sort of insights you're kind of drawing together to, I guess, generate that picture of potential lead engagement and understand, I guess, which ones to prioritize and which ones to.
Yeah. So the lead scoring is a very large conversation, and a lot of people love to take it in different directions. I think one of the basic things that I really enjoy using as a foundation to explain lead scoring, at least how I see it, is the same one as the account engagement model. And I've loved account engagement for the longest time because I genuinely think they got this right, where they've split it. In marketing automation tools, it's very rare to see an organization that splits what they call the grade versus the score. And I've spoken about MQLs and SQLs, and I've put my definition out there of what they are. But I love that the grade is kind of a reflection of how interested are we in this individual? How closely do they meet our ICP or ideal customer profile? And managing that, which typically you're talking about industry, customer size, like if how close to the perfect customer is this individual, and separating that out from what is the account engagement score, which is the level of interest that they have in us. Have they been coming to our website? Have they been interacting with us? And whether it's events, trade shows, all these things. And having that line in the sand has always been really exciting. So, and I think it's a really good way to have a visualization of, us want to do business with them and then want to do business with us without blurring the lines all in one single lead score. One of the key things in our industry is that it's a lot of times you have to search for information in different industries. We have an overabundance of information because in the mortgage industry, we're actually a very transparent industry, especially after the financial crisis of 2008 and everything. There's been a lot of things in place to kind of put full transparency. So, ultimately, you can look up anything that you want on the consumer access databases that we have for the real estate industry. So for us, we can find out literally every single loan originator who's a potential lead for us, all in a single database. It's very easy to find, but knowing which ones to call, especially because we're in a niche industry, is the bigger question. So we embarked in this journey to be able to be laser focused in the folks that we want to do business with. and doing something that I don't believe is being done anywhere in the industry, to be able to take a live feed of the entire nationwide mortgage transaction history and be able to flag who are the individuals that are doing work in our specific niche. So it's been an exciting journey so far to be able to score all of that and be able to translate that to our account executives to be able to say, here are the folks that are doing business in our niche. You can reach out, you can see their full history, and be able to really deliver that undeniable experience. Because when you're calling or when you're reaching out, we at Lens are a very outbound company. This industry is very outbound in general. You're already showing up with, hey, I've done my homework. Like, I see
Yeah.
that you're doing this. I'm not here to waste your time. Like, like let me tell you a little bit about how we can add value to what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And maybe kind of keeping it high level, because I feel like going into the tech of this could almost be an episode of its own. But what kind of tools are we talking about here? And I know we kind of lean into towards Salesforce, but it's okay if there's other tools as well. What's involved in this?
Yeah. So naturally, it all starts with the mortgage history database. And that's a lot of data. We're talking about millions upon millions upon millions of rows. Anyone that's worked in Salesforce knows that Salesforce is not the ideal place to store all of this data.
Yeah.
So we have an Azure backend that consumes all of this data. And we basically have that mortgage transaction, years worth of mortgage transactions in an Azure backend. And we have been leveraging Data Cloud to be able to ingest that data into Salesforce. So we're using Azure with Data Cloud, and then obviously be able to bring that into Core, which is for us your typical Sales Cloud deployment. And some of that information we're also using with account engagement. So, and again, that's where
Nice.
the scoring comes back in, or the account engagement score comes back
Yeah.
in. So in a nutshell, for this lead scoring purposes, those are like the 4 pillars.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. That's great. And thinking about this now as a journey, what type of other people did you have to interact with? Like, who were the key stakeholders that you got involved with to put this together? And it kind of sounds like it's a living, breathing thing at the moment, which is fine and it's great, right? We're all learning each and every day, but who were the key players that were kind of involved in influencing? Okay, well, this is a plus, this is a minus to a score. Who were they?
So I'll just take a sidebar to say it's funny you say living and breathing thing, because it kind of is living and breathing because it has a
Yeah.
name. So
Okay.
we actually have created Lexi, who is
Right.
our digital lending ally, as we call it. She's the character behind it all. So all of the whole digital transformation process, we're trying to put it under this Project Lexi, and the insights that we derive from things like this all are under Lexi. Um, so the departments that we had to work internally have been several. So we are working a lot with the account executives,
Yep.
mostly because we're trying to put this for them. This is marketing as well, to be able to kind of bring that piece in. So we have been working a lot with both of these departments to validate what we're doing, validate the scores, especially when it comes to lead scoring, because we get all of this raw data
Yeah.
and we have to make some sense of it. We have to make sure that we can fine tune this score, and our score. I think that actually, I'll save that for a little bit later. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we've been working with these teams to be able to make sure that our score is as accurate as possible, and we've done multiple iterations of it. And the key thing about it is that we try to make it simple for everyone, because there's just so much complexity behind our lead scoring,
Yep.
that for an end user that may already be struggling with grappling how to use a CRM, because they might not be the most technical individual, we decided to consolidate everything, third-party data first, first-hand data, everything that goes into calculating our score. No matter how we do it or how we revise it, it always ends up with a score from 0 to 100. So that
Right.
way, they just need to care about, hey, I just need to sort this list descending, and I have my targets, my primary targets at the top because they have the highest score, and that's who we think, we believe are the best the best individuals that fit that ICP of we want to do business with them.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's awesome. And I think a way to describe this, it kind of sounds similar to what Salesforce is doing in this space with Einstein scoring. And I think that kind of very similar method, I think goes 0 to 99. So very
Yeah,
similar, like number scale. And then ultimately your sales team or your sales drivers, whatever you call them, are using this to prioritize their leads, right?
that's correct. So we're consistently revising it, but ultimately when it comes to cadences, we use sales engagement, formerly have velocity sales.
Oh yeah.
And one of the key things that they prioritize on is the score.
Right.
I've always liked Einstein scoring for as an out of the box solution.
Yeah.
And someone may be able to come and correct me, but my understanding was that the limitation with Einstein scoring at the time is that you can only use data that's already in the object. Or
Yeah. I
I don't
think
know if
that
yeah.
in EAC as well, Einstein Activity Capture.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
like roughly you're limited in that piece, and because we're bringing so much data from outside, we just decided to say, hey, we're just going to have a custom score field. We call it the Lexi score, and sales engagement, everything just points to that. And also because we are actually we're very heavily contact object organization. We have a very small use for the leads object, which is where Einstein scoring resides. So um, that's another thing as well that we have to keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay. And thinking about this again as a living, breathing thing, like how long did it take to put the first iteration of this together? Like we're talking weeks, months?
So that's a great question. It was, I think, a week to 2 weeks. And
Okay.
the key thing here is that we don't let, you know, great get in the way of good. It's
Right.
about starting somewhere and iterating on that. We could keep formulating this and revising this and building on top of it and slapping more functionality on top
With
of it. We could keep
Yeah.
doing this for days and never go live with anything. We decided to say, hey, let's just start with something incredibly basic. And we have like our, you know, on the back end, the API names, we have like LexiScore V1, V2, like
Okay.
we have the different iterations of the different formulas we've used. And
Good.
ultimately, we're just working with our teams to try to get feedback from them to say, hey, yeah, here's a person that scored really high but is not a good fit, and here's why. So just trying to see how we can continuously fine tune this to
And
be able to maximize what we're doing. There's a couple also cool things that we're doing, like, but again, it's all based on as we go, as we learn, and iterate from there. Yeah.
awesome. Well, a couple of things that I'm picking up on from that conversation really. Feedback is important, right? It's a gift. If people weren't giving you this feedback, you wouldn't have Alexi V5, V6, V7, like because you wouldn't know how to improve or what to enhance or where there was potentially things missing or whatever before. And I guess at some point in time, there's probably a decision made, right, to not expose the raw data to people. Maybe are you just exposing the score? You're not exposing all of the noise, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think simplify is a big thing, and I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail on the head there. My ethos in working and in user adoption specifically
Yeah.
has always been, in order to receive good feedback, you have to give good value. So I've made mentions of this in different conversations, but ultimately it's about a reciprocal relationship. And
Yeah.
when people are starting off, they can be very opposed to Salesforce. If you have low-hanging fruit that you can deliver on to help show value, to say, hey, here's how I can simplify your day. Here's how, hey, tell me what your biggest pain points are. If you can deliver on things that will help improve their productivity by using the CRM, that starts to build that level of trust of saying, oh yeah, I was having this issue. I told them something, they did something about it. Because so many folks have that experience where they're like, oh yeah, I gave my concerns, I shared my problems, and nothing ever got done.
Yeah.
And then you kind of just spiral out of control there because the feedback starts getting less and less reliable, if at all.
Mhm.
and you start getting into a lot of trouble. So
Yeah.
to be able to do something like this, be it lead scoring or anything else, investing in the feedback, like feedback is earned, I think. It's not deserved,
Yeah.
right? So it's something that you have to work on and take that initial step to be able to build that relationship, to be able to ensure that you have that two-way communication, that two-way street, to be able to maximize really what you're doing by having, you know, decent feedback.
Yeah. I love that. And I think, yeah, it does lean into that kind of open door mentality, like that open door kind of policy type thing. I think that's super important. And now thinking about Lexi, and what version are you up to now? 5, 6, 7?
Lexi is going on version 3 now. Yeah, we're still
Right.
early on. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
still early on, but yeah, it's surprising because when you start getting feedback, a lot of times you start realizing, and I think for us, one of the things that we're trying to do also is that we're trying to prepare for the future. So we're trying to get away from doing a
Mhm.
lot of knee-jerk
Right. You want to be
reactions.
proactive. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like for example, the upcoming version of the Lexi score, one of the key things that we're doing is that we're sourcing out a vendor to be able to properly calculate time zones.
Right.
And what we're doing is that we're going to drop the Lexi score to 0 if it's outside business hours. So that way, in a sales engagement world, the person could be a great fit, but if they're outside of the calling hours, outside of business hours for them, it'll drop it to 0. So that way, we don't see it. So the folks don't see it, and it doesn't go on their call list. But as soon as they are in business hours, it brings it back up to their original score, to be able to avoid giving a bad experience where people are calling folks out of business
Wow.
hours.
Yeah.
In our case, here in the United States, you have folks that are starting out. If I pick up the phone at 9 in the morning or 9:30 in the morning here in Florida, if I'm calling people in California by mistake, I'm waking someone up, and that person's not going to be happy with us ringing their phones.
Yeah.
So, those are kind of like it's based on feedback and iterations, right? And those are things that sometimes you want to take time before you roll that out instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, quick change, boom, we're live with this."
Yeah. And I guess in your case, you're just dealing with the US time zones, right?
Yeah, that's one of the big things for us. At my past organization, we were a global organization, so we had the
Cool.
different continents and everything to keep in mind, and different
Yeah.
teams and all of these things. But here, yeah, at Lens, we're nationwide, so we're not global.
Awesome. And now thinking about this, and I'm actually going to switch some of the orders of my questions now, but this one I think fits quite nicely here. You've gone from version 1 to 2, and you're going to get to 3. If you were to start again, what
Mhm.
would you change or do differently along the way? So you think you've obviously had some feedback and you've been working to address that feedback. Maybe which of those feedback items had like the biggest value or made the most difference, do you think?
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll share this one. So this is external feedback, above all. So the partner that we chose to provide us with the mortgage transaction database,
Mm.
we did some rounds of review, and they basically sent us a sample file. And one of the key things that held us back on FlexiScore V1 was that the data set looked good, and we thought that we had something decent, when they did a sample data set. And when they sent us the full thing, we quickly realized that there was a very large amount of data that was incorrect in certain columns that
Right.
we really wanted to rely on. I think one of the crucial things that when you're working with search large data volumes, probably taking a couple of extra steps in validating things. And I think for us, the biggest thing that we missed was that, like I mentioned, we're in a niche. They were just sending us a sample of the entire database, world or nationwide. And we should have said, hey, can you give us examples within, our niche, within, these specific IDs, NMLS IDs, or whatever
Right.
have you? Because we quickly realized that in our industry that there were things that they were getting wrong, and it took us a while to be able to rectify that. So I think that, more attention to detail on reviewing large data volumes, not taking things for granted there because things can go awry very easily.
Mm.
Um, it's a big commitment. Like large data volumes don't come cheap. Like this,
No.
it's a serious
Yeah.
partnership that you're getting into with a vendor. So, I don't think anyone does monthly contracts. So like you're at the very least, you're going to be in an annual commitment, and you want to make
Yeah.
sure you have that right. So that's probably been one of the biggest things that, if we were to start over again, that we would probably dedicate more time to that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I think that's a great lesson because I think, at least in my opinion, data can make or break a system, right?
Hmm.
If your data isn't great, then your Lexi score is not going to be great. So it's
Yeah.
important that it is and it's accurate and it's also specific for your particular industry or niche as well. I think that's important too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%. And
Yeah.
everything that we're doing nowadays, right? Like if the foundation isn't there, you're gonna struggle. Be it whether it's with data cloud, AI, agent force, whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
looking at.
Whatever. Mm.
Your interactions and your automations are only gonna be as good as the foundation that they're built on top of.
Yeah.
There's no saving there's no saving grace unless you have a really good data foundation. So.
No. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a really solid point there. So thinking about this now, maybe there's someone listening that's kind of looking to get started to do something similar, make their
Mhm.
own kind of Lexi. If that person were listening, what tips, advice would you give them if they were looking to start out? Like, where can they go to get started?
So I think there's a lot of good information out there with regards to lead scoring.
Yeah,
You definitely have to take it in with a grain of salt because people can go in different directions.
yeah,
I've always went for simplicity as much as possible. So, for example, I have a very black and white definition of what MQL and SQL are.
yeah,
Um, and I try to stick by that in everything that we implement. And then equally, if you're starting out, you may not have the most robust data set. So keep it simple. Keep your scoring based on whatever criteria, you can trust the most. So, for example, if you like just maybe industry or company size, maybe information that you can find on a company page on LinkedIn,
yeah,
the number of employees, the industry, the location, and just try to run your score based on that. Because one of the key things is in lead scoring is that you want to be able to treat everyone equally. And if you don't have the same information for everyone, then you're not going to be able to accurately set a decent enough standard to be able to say, hey, I'm going to score this person. But, if half of my accounts are
yeah,
missing that information, then you're not going to be able to put a good basis together, really, to understand what's working and what's not. You will be tempted by saying, yeah, no, let's just buy this wild data set
yeah,
and come up with this crazy formula to calculate this. And I would strongly, if you guys haven't done it before, I would strongly push back on that to be able to say, let's start with simple first, right? And then when we have simple up and running, we can fine tune, right? And rule and iterate and build more on top of that. I think that's probably the best approach that you can take to be
sure.
able to to improve. And also, lead scoring shouldn't be based on anything that you have to ask the customer. So, for example, like that's more like SQL, that's more like opportunity scoring.
Yeah,
Once you're engaged in the sales process and you're going to get more information. A lot of times I've seen people like make the issue of, oh, what kind of product are they interested in, and trying to rank them on, whatever product the fit they have. And you don't know that until you talk to them. So you won't be able to score them and say who are the people that are worth reaching out to versus not until you get in a conversation with them. So don't make the criteria that your lead scoring is conditional on based on things that you'll only find out after the fact, after you get in conversation. Because again,
yeah,
you won't have that data set, that piece of data to properly score your entire database.
yeah, definitely. And I think there's good tidbits in there as well. Like, and thinking like in the UK, we have something called Companies House that stores all the information of all the limited companies in the UK. You can get the company number, number of employees, last account, like annual revenue, that type of information can all be returned from that API. So I'm assuming that there's a US equivalent or something like that out there.
Yeah.
So Bassett on that, I guess I want to say like standard data set is something that I'm kind of taking away from this, like, or I guess a data set for which you'll have data for each and every lead, right? You don't want to be basing it off of salutation if you don't have salutation.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. You want to standardize as much as you can. You want to make sure that to the best of your ability, you want to be able to cover as many of the accounts or the leads that you're going to be running the scoring model on. A particular criteria isn't as good if you can only populate that data set or that field for
yeah,
60% of your accounts
yeah,
or your
exactly.
leads. So that's just something that you have to be very mindful of and not try to get yourself in a trap with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And if you were to like summarize the qualities or like personality traits of somebody that was embarking on their own journey like this, what words would you use to describe that person? Is curiosity important? Is being
Curiosity is always
inquisitive?
important. That's
Yeah,
that's my number one trait that I look for in an individual. If you can show me a curious person, I want you in my team. Because they're tinkerers, they're natural tinkerers,
yeah, I
right?
think that,
And
yeah,
a lot of what makes this ecosystem great are the fact that you have these tinkerers that learn what you can and can't do with Salesforce. I think curiosity is a base no matter what you're doing. I think you have to have someone who is not afraid of being analytical and I guess it ties with curiosity as well as just that not letting go of the bone of like, oh yeah, I just ran a basic report. Here's what it is. Truly someone who tries to go in a deeper layer and understand why are these numbers correct? Am I cherry picking my numbers? Or just settling for what I see at face value and constantly be able to evaluate. Like, for example, today we had a call where we're migrating one department into Salesforce and we have Salesforce as a database kind of consuming this some of the data that we run weekly reports on or weekly
yeah,
meetings on. And as someone was going through this Excel spreadsheet, I was validating all the data in Salesforce. And I was like, okay, great. All of the data matched. And I was like, for the first time, I was like, okay, I think next week we can run this whole meeting in Salesforce.
no,
However, after the meeting, I went and I was like, okay, but let me look at the Salesforce report now. And not only, and I guess we don't have video here, but I took I took all of the loans that I measured and I was like, okay, I was able to account for all of these, but I found that there were 12 that were on the Salesforce report but weren't on the ones that we covered. And I'm like, all right, guys,
no,
let's understand what's happening here, right? Because and it's someone that is always trying to think of that extra step or kind of
yeah,
just dive in a little bit deeper to make sure, yes, this all makes sense. Yes, all the dots are connected, which in a small organization, even in large organizations, it can be very tough because you have the fires you're trying to put out today, uh, the things that are being asked of you. So to go that extra mile, which I think kind of leads on or segues into the final thing, is that you probably need to have someone who has a very good time management ability to be able to block off the time to say, I'm going to block off time in my day to properly dedicate to reviewing this and not let, all the other fires and all the other
no,
noise take
yeah,
away from not getting this done. So I think that's probably the final skill set that really helps, like the character traits that really make someone stand out for this kind of stuff.
yeah. Okay, awesome. And now you have an opportunity to demyth or clarify something about lead scoring. And I don't know if anything comes to mind here, but like people think of lead scoring and perhaps they have a common misconception or something that you just like to clarify. Does anything like that come to mind?
Biggest myth is that you're never going to get it right on the first try. As far as I
Yeah,
understand, it's if you do, congratulations, and if you do, I'd also be
yeah,
concerned because I think you settled too easily. Um, Maybe there's some use cases where it's that black and white, but it's a commitment. Getting lead scoring right is a commitment. Just like getting your account engagement score, the points that get assigned. But the
yeah,
points get assigned, like people just use the default points, and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, no, but sometimes in different companies there should be a different point system. You should want to make
yeah,
sure that you validate things correctly or apply the right points correctly. It's the same thing with lead scoring. It has to be an iterative thing, and you can't just say, oh yeah, this quarter's project is deliver a lead scoring solution and then sign off, deliver, and say we're done and we never have to look at this again. You'll only learn how good your lead scoring is once the end users are using it, once that's being measured every day, and making a commitment to follow up on it every now and then, right? And kind of iterate on it is really what you have to do to make sure that you get the most out of it, right? So, and that goes with, reports, whether it's lead conversion reports, ROI reports for all the efforts that you're putting in, that all needs to be kind of taken into place. I think the biggest myth is that it's one and done and all my problems go away.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a myth with most things, right? And I think it comes back to what you said earlier. Just remind us what you said about good and great.
Yeah, you don't want to let great get in the way of good.
Yeah.
So, you want to start somewhere. It's about just, not overcomplicating it at first and iterating on it.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. It's a living, breathing thing.
Yes,
And once
exactly.
you see it that way, it becomes living sooner
Yes.
than it would otherwise. So I think that's a great metaphor there. So we are bringing this episode to a close, but before we do go, what's a way for people to connect with you? And do you have any particular pieces of content or things like that on lead scoring that you feel would be helpful?
So, best way to contact me is through LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
If you have any questions with regards to lead scoring or anything like that, feel free to just connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I don't have any articles that I've set down.
Yeah.
Writing is not one of my fortes. I could talk these things out as much as I can. But I do have a couple of presentations I've done that I've recorded from different dreaming conferences where I talked a lot about leads and the concept of lead scoring. I talked about the MQL, the SQL, all of these
Yeah.
things. So I do have some content on that. So if anyone's interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll send the link to the YouTube videos and we'll go from there.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. And I think we lent on account engagement a little bit because I feel like we both have a soft spot for account engagement, formerly Pardot. So I think there's some great resources on Trailhead about at least from an account engagement point of view, scoring and grading as well, which does kind of introduce you to this concept of marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, or MQL, SQL. So I think maybe that's something else for people to consider. So thanks again for your time today. I think it's a really great session. And hopefully we can inspire some more people to do their own lead scoring solution as well.
Exactly. I'd be curious to hear what other folks are doing, what they're trying, and hopefully if this inspired them in any way to fine tune their process a little bit more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time.